Hey everybody, Al Puglisi Trains. This is an episode, or episode 2, I should say, of Let's Talk About Brass. It's an ongoing episode on my channel. And to see episode 1, which many of you did, but some of you might not have, Howard Zane gave us a discussion on brass that many found, including myself, extremely valuable and extremely informative. And the way that you can see that interview easily on my channel is go into my channel, and then at the bottom of the screen you click on my playlist, and then when you get in my playlist, go down to Let's Talk About Brass, and you can click on Let's Talk About Brass and see prior episodes. So I'm going to talk a little bit with Howard more. There's so much about brass to talk about. It can be its own YouTube channel. It's a tremendous amount of information, and it is a hobby. Arguably, it's a hobby within our hobby. Some don't have layouts. Some simply collect brass locomotives. So let's go see Howard, and let me ask him some questions that a viewer actually asked us to ask Howard. So let's go do it. All right, Howard, we're not going to ask you how you're doing today because it's another episode of Let's Talk About Brass.
86 years old, and every day is a challenge, but who can, that's all right.
And we had a nice fellow that wrote in. He's a collector of brass, or beginning to collect brass, and he wrote a bunch of questions, and I thought I'd share some of them. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions I found very interesting is, are there any tips you can give somebody, care tips to care for a brass locomotive, or when they store a brass locomotive?
All I could say is one word: love. Love your engine.
Right.
Take care of it. That's
right.
all. If you abuse it, it's like anything else. It's not going to serve you.
Right.
If you take care of it, oil it, run it well, and just don't abuse the damn thing, you'll be fine. It'll last several lifetimes.
Right.
And then some.
And just common sense. You don't want to store it in the attic where it's 100 degrees.
No, you don't want to do that.
Common sense. And a lot of, let's talk about a situation where I had a collector. She had about 100 pieces stored up in an attic in boxes, and the heat from the summer. Well, I'll let you just tell the customer what the heat does to the foam that the brass is packed.
Well, there's all kinds of foam. There's white foam, there's red foam, there's gray foam. And every manufacturer used a different foam, or every importer. Mm-hmm. Some foams, like the PFM yellow foam, does not last. Okay. The red foam will last, but it has a tendency to stain. But it's no big deal because you paint over it.
Right.
Every foam has different characteristics. It's best really to keep it in an environment room temperature.
Right. Well, this stuff that we pulled out of the attic, the foam actually melted on the locomotives and ruined the locomotives.
A lot of people, when they see that, the foam stacked on a locomotive, they say it's ruined. Mm-hmm. What you do is you take your locomotive and you get scalding hot water.
Okay.
Tap water is fine. Run it as hot as you can stand it.
Right.
Stick a toothbrush in there and
right.
Start rubbing that, and it comes right off of a toothbrush,
right.
A wet toothbrush. That's all you got to do. Unless it pits into the metal, that's something else. And then you can sandblast it and so forth. But I've never had an experience like that.
Okay. But it's just common sense, just taking care of them, making sure they're in a humidity controlled environment. Temperatures aren't crazy. Just common sense.
Common sense is very, very true.
And then another one of the questions was, we talked about various manufacturers have their higher end lines, like PFM would have the crowns, and there'd be gem rubies. Why don't you go into a little bit more about the different...
Several people use Crown. Hallmark used the Crown series.
Okay.
Other people use different words. The marketing terms, that's all.
Okay.
Now, the PFM Crowns, there was a little more hand-built activity going into those. So they're definitely Crowns. But then again, there were models that should have been Crowns that were not.
Right.
So go figure.
So just because it says Crown doesn't necessarily
it's worth
mean...
more. If it says Crown, it's definitely worth about 15% more.
Okay.
If it's a Crown. But then again, those days, they're kind of gone. Actually, there was a time when actually brass was advertised in the back cover of every magazine,
right.
As you remember.
Right.
Not so. It's not mainstream anymore. Brass is basically a hobby within a hobby, and it's unfortunate. The reason I like brass is because I like quality. Right. And I get no pleasure out of a plastic locomotive that's one of 10,000 mass-produced in a factory. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
Even though I won't impugn anybody that has these things. There's something for every budget. Now, I'm not broke, as people know, but I just like the finest.
Right.
And even if I wasn't broke, I just wouldn't buy as much. I just would buy one good piece every year.
Right.
But I just like having that.
Who's left importing brass?
Damn few. One time there was about 100 importers, maybe more. If you get on brasstrains.com, they have a list of all the importers. And there were a lot of them, but a lot of them fell by the wayside, like one-hit wonders.
Right.
The old rock and roll days.
But nowadays it's just Division Point and maybe a few others.
There's Division Point, but Jack Vansworth he's about my age.
Ooh.
And he's getting ready to retire.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but I can't see how anybody could retire, but then again, who knows? Then there's Fred Hill and Dave Allen, or the Coach Yard. Right. They do some beautiful stuff. Now, there's a few other lesser importers, but, like Key every once in a while will do a Southern Pacific or some kind of O-scale diesel, but it's not there.
And then Sunset, Golden Gate Depot, is that?
Sunset is one that's actually, I forgot to bring Sunset up. They have a division called Third Rail.
Right.
Now they're producing quite a bit in 3-rail, and they also do 2-rail variations of it.
Right. And I think are they part of Golden Gate Depot too, or is that?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Golden Gate is not a brass company.
Okay, right. They make aluminum, beautiful aluminum passenger cars. Well, let's see. You got some goodies in. I'm going to pan over here.
Al,
folks.
there's always goodies.
Oh, these are really goodies. You got in this big boy. Let's talk about this big boy.
This was unpainted when I got it. This was painted by Gwyn Birch, who was a hell of a lot better than I am. I could paint these things, but not like Gwyn Birch can. So it was worthwhile to send it down to him. And these all three here were painted by Gwyn.
Oh wow! Now, what's a typical paint job run? It depends.
Oh, I do it 250. He's so fast and efficient that he passes that on to the customer.
Right.
He's done all the paint, not all of it, but a lot of painting for Overland Models and a few other importers.
Wow. This B&O back here, this is a K.
That's a K1B or a KB1. I have no idea.
And it's a very rare piece, isn't it?
Well, Sunset made this around the late 80s, and they sold for around 600. Actually, it's a Seaboard. It was a KB1 and a K1B or something like that.
Wow.
One had the Walshard gear. It's all in the valve gear. The only difference. This was they sold these to the B&O, and it's very popular. There are B&O collectors that would kill to have this model. This is the second one I have. There's one downstairs now, as you know.
Yes. Does this one have DCC or?
It does. It has the works. Jan's done everything to it.
Oh, that's right. Now this little guy over here, I remember as a teenager, Artie Weinsdorfer that got me really into scale modeling was a Sierra Railroad modeler.
Well, that's the antithesis of rare.
Yeah.
Besides this one, they probably did 3,000 of these things.
Right.
But variations. This was like a second run. The first one came in a green bread loaf box. Looked like a bread loaf.
Oh, wow.
And the second one came in a blue denim box. But this was a second run, actually.
Wow.
It doesn't have brake shoes or anything like that, but they're good runners. Now, this one Jan modified with I think there's a can motor in this. Yeah, there is.
How can you tell?
No, actually, no, it's not a can motor. It's got the standard open frame motor.
Okay.
Because I bought this for a resale, actually.
And then you've got a bunch of goodies down here if you want to talk about.
This is a small amount of, whatever.
Right.
Well, these are just I haven't cataloged these yet.
Yeah,
some go downstairs and some go on the shelf.
These are new acquisitions.
Well, I would buy a Deadwater Buffalo complete with maggots if the price is right.
Jesus.
So every once in a while when the price is good. Now on eBay, for example, I look at the stuff and I'll put in maybe 100, sometimes 200 bids a week. But I only win one in a month because I put in my price. I don't get caught up in the auction bid.
Right.
I put in what I'm willing to pay for it, and if I win the thing, great. If I don't win it, I don't give a shit.
Right. And that's a good attitude to have. Tell us about the history of this big boy. You said it was made by
Paragon. It was Paragon was made in 1958. They only did a few models. I know very little about it, and there's very little information. I know there was only a handful of these made, like 12 or 13.
So for 1958,
it was unbelievable.
The
only other big boy around was the Tetsudo, which was prior to prior to 210 Shoto, and there was International. I think they did a Big Boy. LMB did a Big Boy at the time, and but this was far superior. Now the only thing that compared to this was in 1961 the Gem Ruby,
Right.
which was incredible.
Right.
I have one of those. This is almost as good, but not quite. And I don't know the value. I would probably say, well, there's just too few of them. I would say, I think Brass Trains, which is the only name in town that's offering prices, I'd say they probably have this around 600 or 700, unpainted.
Right.
I would say with that paint job, it's probably worth about 15.
Right.
Now.
And that's just amazing for 1959.
58.
58. Good God.
Oh, it was way ahead of his time. I can remember going down to Bob Webster's shop when I was in college in New York there in the late 50s. And they had a couple of these. And I wasn't in the HO then. Matter of fact, I wasn't even into model railroading, but I used to love it because of Dad. Dad used to shop there all the time. So I would go in there with Dad, and we see these things, HO and O-scale.
Now, one of the customers asked, is there a way to tell that something's a ruby or a crown? Is there
a
a
name on it?
The name on the...
Yeah, now the rubies are all built by a fellow named Horatio, or Hush, whatever, Japanese. I can't figure it out, but his name is Tagaya.
Okay.
I can't think of his first name.
But it would be on the locomotive.
Oh, yeah, it's all signed. Most of these people, the hand-builds will sign them.
Wow.
And also a number, like the Ruby Big Boy was 50. So the one we have is number 2650.
Right. And oftentimes that paperwork would be in the box.
Yeah,
you would hope.
Sometimes.
Right, you would hope.
But usually the original box, now rubies all came in red boxes, ruby red, with beautiful interiors.
Wow.
They had, kind of like a velvet or a satin interior. It was just beautiful.
Because some folks are worried that they buy a ruby or a crown and the box says that, but the engine's not actually a ruby or a crown.
Ask an expert. But most brass dealers, including myself, if there's ever a mistake, I make it right.
Right.
And any deal. See, brass is so small, and this field now, with high tech, if you screw up something in New York City at 9 o'clock in the morning, by 9:30, people on the West Coast will hear about it.
Right.
Now, if you do everything right, you're accepted. That's accepted
Right.
as being professionalism. So they don't talk about that. They only talk about the screw-ups.
Right.
And you just can't afford to screw up. So any dealer would make it good. There was one dealer I can think of years ago that he went to jail actually because he stole from a lot of people. I know his name, but I'm not going to mention his stuff.
Okay. Good. But you work from a reputable dealer and you'll be all right. You know, if you don't know who you're dealing with, then you want to exercise caution.
I would say 99.9% of the dealers today are reputable.
Right, right.
And that's a plus.
Yep. Well, we are going to talk a lot more about brass as time goes on.
25 words or less.
Yeah. You know.
You're asking it's the whole field. The only thing I can say about brass right now, it's in a field filled with the most parsimonious people in the world.
Right.
And that is model railroader. Parsimonious means cheap.
Cheap.
And brass is not a budget item. So what I don't understand is why it stays within the hobby of model railroading. Now, I say cheap, that's not fair, but I should say budget oriented because a lot of people in this hobby, there's something for everybody at every budget. And a lot of people are well off, but they're not that well off to buy tons of brass.
Right.
And so there's a big difference.
Right. Well, Howard, I appreciate it, and we'll be talking a lot more about brass as time goes on. And Andre Runs, too, is a section of our channel.
Andre is kind of like you're my structured disciple. Andre is kind of a brass disciple. Now, I had another disciple. As you probably know, I started Brass Trains.
Right.
And sold that to Dan Glazier in 2005. It was called the Piermont Division, but our website was brasstrains.com.
Yep.
So now I met Dan. This is very interesting because the word got out that I was going to sell my collection in my Piermont Division because I just got tired of filling out customs forms because everything over $1,000 was going overseas.
Wow.
And I hate doing paperwork. The only paperwork I want to do comes on a roll and sits in the bathroom.
Right.
That's the only paperwork I can do. Anything else, forget it. So it required a lot of paperwork. So I was getting really frustrated, and I said, I should have known the day. Then I had a helper, Carol, She'd come in every once in a while and fill out the customs forms, and she got tired of it. So I just, the word got out, and Dan heard about it that I was going to sell. And I met Dan. I was a guest lecturer at the Southeast Model Railroad, or NMRA, convention down in Florida. And Dan had a lot of very good questions. He was 29 years old then. And I really liked this kid. So Sandy and I took him out for dinner, and he was sharp. So when the word got out that I was selling my collection, he said, "Hey, I don't really have any money to buy it, but can we talk?" So he came up and we talked and we talked. And there was no bullshit with this guy.
Right.
He was the real deal. So he said, "Hey, take the whole friggin' thing, send me a check whenever you can." Al, he paid a lot of money for BrassTrains.com.
Right.
We're talking almost 7 figures. Okay, however, he broke it down into 12 payments of someone's like 80,000, 90,000 a month. He never missed a payment.
Right.
And that's rare.
Just a good guy. And
guy.
good folks to
Now,
deal
he
with.
sold the business. I met Rowan. I don't know Rowan that well as I know Dan, but I'd say the business is in good hands. They're doing very well.
Yes. And it's a trustworthy business to buy from.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, folks, when you're buying on eBay has buyer protection, but just exercise common sense when you're looking to get
Well, you are
stuff.
buying in the blind.
Right.
That's No, I never like shipping things out. I love people to come over here. We have various types of test tracks. We have a DC test track, DCC. We can test it, we can tweak it, or
Right.
we can fix it while the customer's waiting.
Right.
And that's fine. This way they leave here and it runs, and if they get the thing and ship it, it's dangerous,
Right.
and then they get it. Now, there was a time, Al, when I could ship brass and would have a bent cow catcher or a bent piping, and they fixed it. It was no big deal.
Right.
Today it's so expensive that these people want only the top. So if it's got a bent cow catcher or
Right.
a bent pipe or a bent coupler, they'll send it back.
Right.
So it has to go back for the mills, risk being damaged again, and it's crazy. I sent something back 3 times because there's 3 times it got damaged.
Wow.
And finally just said the hell with it. If you want the damn thing, come pick it up.
Yeah.
And they did.
Well, Howard, I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Okay, there's so much more to talk about, but
Yes.
all right.